and I'm the publisher of Ethos. Andrew is a co-founder, and he'll be chatting in a minute. Obviously, it's 2020 and life is crazy at the moment, so we're doing this on Zoom because that's become the kind of way things are going. At the same time, we've got a really international audience, and so it's really nice to be able to have people here from different countries and different parts of the world and be able to join together on something like this. But as I said, this is kind of the first stage in us kind of building our community a bit more and creating that ethos community, because good things happen when you all talk to each other. So we're taking our first steps into what you might want from that. And we're experimenting a bit. So we will see today we've got a feedback form for you all. We want to know what you think, what you enjoyed, what you liked, what you might want to do in the future, and we'll be asking you all that at the end of the conversation. We will also be planting a tree for everybody who's come this evening. So at the moment, I guess we're going to be planting 13 or 14 trees. Who knows if it goes up and down as the night goes on. Just a bit of housekeeping for you. As Andrew mentioned then, now that I've stopped singing, we will start recording the session. When you're in the breakout rooms, we won't be recording any of that, so you can, chat away as freely as you like. But we'll be recording it just because we can share bits on social later. Other housekeeping things, you are all on mute at the moment, just to keep background noise down, really, while Chris and Daianna are chatting. If you do want to join in, say anything, ask anything, there's a chat box at the bottom of the screen if you want to drop in any questions, or just raise your hand, or digitally raise your hand. And Nikki, who is to my right on my screen, but is waving at you now, is keeping an eye on things that are happening in the chat box too. So if anything crops up there, give Nikki a shout and she'll keep an eye on that. Other than that, we've got two great guests who are going to speak tonight about activism and kind of get you rolling, thinking about some of the things that you might want to change in the world. Andrew's going to say a few words about that and introduce Chris, who's our first speaker.
Hello, everyone. I won't speak for too long. Chris and I first spoke 2018, I think. I dashed out of the International Business Festival to interview Chris for a feature for, oh, you can't actually see it. I'm holding a copy of the Ethos magazine that I interviewed Chris for. And we spoke about the kind of background for Ben & Jerry's and Ben & Jerry's kind of remarkable kind of history of activism. We also spoke this year, probably a couple of months back, shortly after the Ben & Jerry's Black Lives Matter statement, which I think was correct me if I'm wrong, it's like the biggest statement in terms of visibility that you've made to date. So I will hand you over to Chris.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Fiona. It's I'm pleased to be a part of the experiment here. So let me perhaps talk a little bit about my background and then a little bit about my role at Ben & Jerry's. So let me start with kind of what my role is. So I've been at Ben & Jerry's for coming up on 8 years, and my title is Head of Global Activism Strategy. It's a moderately unusual strategy title for a for-profit company. And my role at the company is to work with a team of what we call activism managers. We have a staff of about 10 currently in a number of markets around the world to design strategies to advance progressive social change. So I'll come back to the work at Ben & Jerry's. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a unconventional business person. I have spent most of my career in the public policy and not-for-profit sector. I started my career working for Bernie Sanders. I'm speaking to you from Burlington, Vermont, which is both where Ben & Jerry's global headquarters is, but it is also the place where Bernie Sanders first entered political life by being elected the mayor of Burlington, narrowly unseating a mayor who had been here for quite some time by 10 votes. So I started my career working for Bernie. I spent about half a dozen years leading the climate change campaign at Greenpeace. And just about 8 years ago, I took this position of kind of head of activism strategy at Ben and Jerry's. You may know that Ben and Jerry's has this kind of long history of getting engaged in issues and sort of attempting to use the power and tools that it has to advance sort of change in the world. And it was about 8 years ago that the company decided to bring someone in-house who had kind of campaign skills. And prior to that, the campaigns that were run were sort of shared responsibility between people on the marketing team and people that sat on the social mission team, but they weren't folks that had come from a sort of campaigning background. And so that was really the beginning of a process that has led to the team of 10 folks that we have now that represent this sort of campaign team that exists within a for-profit ice cream company. So I think the approach that we have at Ben & Jerry's is a unique one. And what we do is we really seek to leverage the kind of tools that we have to sell ice cream and put it in service of activists and advocates who are on the front lines working on the issues that are rooted in our values. So we don't pretend to be experts on these issues that we tackle, but the groups and partners that we work with are. And so our sort of superpower is that, you know, our team is great at selling ice cream. You know, during my days at Greenpeace, I was incredibly fortunate to work with some of the most passionate environmental activists and advocates in the world. What we were not necessarily were people who were trained to sell ideas and points of view. And, you know, at the risk of, I don't want to overstate this, and I don't want to sound crass, but I do believe it's true that the idea or selling the idea that climate change is real, it requires urgent action. It requires us to transition off of fossil fuels and quickly, is not completely dissimilar from selling the idea for Chunky Monkey or chocolate fudge brownie, right? And so at Greenpeace, passionate advocates who understood the issues, but not necessarily skilled in how to communicate those ideas. It is also true that at Greenpeace, we were often preaching to the choir. People support Greenpeace because they care about the environment. The opportunity at a place like Ben & Jerry's is we speak to people who love our ice cream. And so there's an opportunity for a bit of bait and switch, right? That we speak to a kind of much more general population. And so, you know, for better, for worse, people have strong affinities to certain brands and corporations, and our fans connect with our company very deeply. And that opens up an opportunity to do the kind of work that we do at Ben & Jerry's. You know, for me, that was the exciting opportunity, sort of stepping away from the not-for-profit sector, the civil society sector, and going to work at a for-profit corporation. You know, I spent 6 years at Greenpeace basically beating up corporations, fossil fuel companies, oil companies, coal companies. It was 6 years of corporate campaigning. And I thought and was attracted to this idea of corporations as a positive actor within society, that this idea that corporations could do something other than advocate for their own narrow self-interest. Because corporations, you know, people think of Ben & Jerry's as being sort of engaged in politics or on issues. All corporations are involved in politics and issues. Most of it's behind the scenes in lobbying and advocating for trade policy, tax policy, things that are in their own sort of narrow self-interest. And, you know, the opportunity and the thing that I was attracted to at Ben & Jerry's was this idea of harnessing the power and influence of a corporation and a beloved brand to really do this work. You know, we are able to communicate ideas in a way that I think is kind of approachable, that's in a sort of unconventional tone or voice, and we really see ourselves as this sort of conduit through which the strategies and ideas and solutions of our civil society partners and allies can sort of be translated through this unique voice and ultimately engaging for our fans and consumers in a way that leads them to take an action. I'll give you a couple of quick examples, and you know, I think of how we do what we do. We just recently, actually, which is I think is a really interesting example, we've built up a sort of database of online activists, not dissimilar from a kind of an NGO. There, within the state of Florida, there was a piece of legislation recently that gave voting rights back to people who had been convicted of a felony, right? And so in the state of Florida, there are some 1.5 million people who had forever been banned from voting because of a prior criminal conviction. This legislation that was passed said, once you finish paying your debt to society, once you've come out of prison, once you've finished probation and parole, your full rights as a citizen of the United States would be restored and your ability to vote. There was legislation that was passed in an attempt to try and slow that process down that said, not only do you have to have finished your sentence, you have to have repaid any fines or fees that were associated with your conviction. So what that obviously profoundly and disproportionately impacts low-income people, and in this case, people of color. So there's been a big effort to try and get folks to make contributions so that we can pay off these fines and fees and folks can participate in the election. In a period of 18 hours, by activating our network through SMS, we were able to raise $100,000, matching $50,000 from Ben & Jerry's and $50,000 from our consumer base, literally in a matter of hours. And so, you know, this is an issue that, absent our kind of engagement with our fan base, would likely not have crossed their radar. So cognizant of time here, I'm looking forward to engaging in some conversation and answering any questions at the end, but perhaps maybe with that, I will sort of hand it back.
Frantically unmuting. Thank you, Chris. Great stuff. So the person that you're going to be joined by now is Daianna Karaian. Daianna and I started speaking earlier this year. Actually, she came across Ethos, I think it was at Impact Summit, in fact. And she's done Fresh Ideas, Free Thinking in the issue that's coming up. So subscribers, you'll be seeing that in about a week or so. And she's also going to be facilitating. We're going to do a follow-up event to this session next month. So Daianna will be involved in that too. But as I said, Daianna is a social entrepreneur. She's a strategist. She's a writer. She's a teacher. And she describes herself as leading a movement of doers. She's a founder of a company called Today Do This. So she works with companies and helps employees embed the aims of the organization, social aims, in their own day jobs. So she's passionate about empowering people who want to change the world, but sometimes don't know where to start. So she's a real person for practical tools, meaningful action, and really kind of getting you to the bottom of what it is that you want to do. So I will hand you now over to Daianna.
Hey everyone. Thanks, Fiona, for inviting me. I was really honored to be a part of this event and also to be on the same sort of bill as Chris from Ben & Jerry's, who, I mean, Ben & Jerry's for me for a long time has been a real sort of beacon of hope in terms of how much further businesses can go in creating a positive impact. I, like Fiona mentioned, often work with companies who want to walk the talk, but who have kind of a pretty long way to go to get there. And I really believe that the only way that they are going to get there is by empowering every one of their employees to play a part in whatever that organization's social aims are as part of their day job, using their own sort of unique skills and talents. So not just, you know, one day of volunteering a year on whatever the company decides that year is the cause du jour, but actually for those companies that you know, are trying to be more purposeful, more mission-led, to make a more positive impact, actually allowing their employees to be able to have a role and a stake in that, no matter what level of the business or what department of the business they're in. So part of what we do is offer tools and training to help companies do just that. But actually, those are just the same sort of processes and resources that anyone can use to turn their intentions to create change into tangible action, not just at work, but at home, at school, and in their communities. And that's what I want to sort of focus on today. Why is that? Because I think we can probably all agree that the news is filled with horrors at the moment. Beyond, you know, the obvious pandemic, the scourge of discrimination that, you know, when it's not literally killing people, is ruining the lives of Black people, queer people, women, migrants, you name it. Politicians all over the world that are daily making asses of themselves. And, you know, sort of looming above all of that, the climate crisis, you know, obviously flooding and setting fire to lots of different parts of the world. And so scary stuff. As a myself, a child of Venezuelan immigrants who was raised in the US and then transplanted to Britain about 15 years ago. And as somebody who's worked in sort of sustainability and social impact for over 20 years, I've felt fairly barraged by bad news for a very long time. And so I kind of want to ask a question of the group. Can you please raise your hand if you have sort of recently despaired about something in the news, but you haven't really actually done anything about it yet? Raise your hand. And that includes me, by the way. Okay, so yeah, pretty much everybody, I think. And I have news for you. No matter, you know, there's no amount of hand-wringing or even tears or, you know, not even hopes and dreams are going to change anything on their own. Change only happens by doing. And that's why I spend my life now helping people take action on the issues they care about, whatever those issues might be, because we need to stop just talking and start more doing. I'll tell you sort of a little story about myself. As a little girl, I dreamed of being an astronaut. I still do. I would sort of look at the moon and the stars at night, wishing that I could like explore the furthest reaches of the galaxy. But I never asked, you know, Santa Claus for a telescope. I never did a space project for the school science fair. I never really kind of applied myself that much at maths and physics, never took an astronomy class, never, you know, even really read a book about the mysteries of the universe. Stephen Hawking's book still sits on my nightstand below a stack of other books. And so, not surprisingly, to this day, I am a complete space ignoramus. But on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, when I was 10, those of you who know the history of Earth Day can probably work out my age, a teacher, my teacher at the time, gave me a baby tree to plant in the garden. And so I took my little baby tree home, I dug a hole in the backyard, I sort of, you know, gently covered the sapling's roots with soil, and that one small act made a huge difference. It sparked my interest in my own planet, rather than just the other planets. which prompted me to start a student environmental club at school, which led me to do environmental studies at university, which resulted in me pursuing a career in sustainability, which is, you know, literally the thing that has led me to being here with you guys now today. And so, you know, I couldn't be more clear based on that experience that dreams as big as the universe achieve nothing on their own, but the tiniest of actions can make a world of difference. And so what sort of stops us from taking action? I mean, there are plenty of people in the world who are literally just struggling to survive. And I would not expect those people to have the bandwidth, really, to, you know, go out and create positive change in their communities. Though actually, it's often those people who do that. But I would reckon that probably most of us on this call have plenty of other excuses. We often think and say that we are too busy. But actually, in my experience and, you know, the various groups that I've been in front of and workshops that we've done, when you dig into the too busy excuse, it actually means a whole host of other things. So one thing is people actually thinking that they can't really make a difference. So there's this sort of culture of hero worship that we have, that, you know, only certain people with certain gifts are the ones who can create change, who can really make a difference. So that's one reason we don't act. Fear of failure is another one. We don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to look stupid. And the third big one that I see is choice paralysis. We just, you know, there are so many things going wrong in the world that we really just don't know where to start. And so we do nothing. And meanwhile, the unscrupulous politicians, the sort of Silicon Valley hotshots, the billionaire CEOs, they're all out doing something. Probably not what we might like them to do. But, you know, at the end of the day, we are no different from them. We're all just flesh and blood little people. So my kind of challenge to you guys is, what are you going to do? And for me, that's where this idea of what I kind of call everyday activism comes in. So my kind of personal definition of activism that I've landed on is it's simply doing something about the things that you say are important to you, making sure that your actions speak as loud as your words. So for me, activism isn't, you know, about dropping everything and jumping on the Rainbow Warrior to become a Greenpeace activist, as romantic and wonderful as that might sound. Really, it's just about first considering what it is that you care about, remembering that when you're making choices about how to spend your time and money, and how you behave at work or home or in your community, and acting accordingly. Really, it's just kind of, for me, it's almost synonymous with integrity activism. So I would say, you know, in terms of like what practically can you do to start taking action on the things that you care about, I'd say the first step is thinking about what are the issues that you feel are important. What makes you angry or anxious or hopeful? Or, you know, what are you excited about? And having kind of thought through that, the next step, I would say, is choose one. Choose one place to start. That doesn't mean that you don't care about other things. It doesn't mean that you ignore the other things. But if we go, you know, back to the idea I mentioned before of choice paralysis, often it's not that we don't have, you know, ideas and intentions and things that we're interested in. There are loads. And that's why often we become sort of overwhelmed. And so I would encourage you to start by just choosing one thing. And then think about, you know, what is one small thing that you can do to make a difference in that area? So, you know, are you anxious about the climate? Probably, you know, I've heard from a number of climate experts that are friends that the what the biggest thing that we can all individually do to help in terms of the climate crisis is not eating meat. And that doesn't mean that I'm asking you to go out and become a vegetarian, but it does mean, next time you think about eating meat, don't. Try that once and see how that goes. And if that goes pretty well, maybe try it again some other time. Have you had it with racism? Well, the next time you see or hear something that bothers you, just say, that's not cool. Speak up. Say something. Are you tired of sexism? After this event, I challenge everybody on this call to tell a woman that you know what you admire about her. Because we all probably know at least one woman. Are you American? As I know that at least 2 of us are on this call. Vote as soon as possible. That is your task. So some of these things, they might sound small, but I am here to tell you that getting started is the hardest part of taking action. And starting with just one small action is actually a huge step, possibly the biggest step. So I will actually have some more suggestions of, practically what we can do, no matter, what issue it is that you feel is important. But I think what I might do is sort of save those for after the breakouts, because I want to make sure that there's enough time for that. How does that sound, guys? Cool. Do you want me to say some things, Andrew?
Yes, please.
Say some smart things.
Say some smart things. Well, so I dropped into a couple of conversations. In one of them, there were a few people, and it sounded like there were some very interesting and exciting conversations related to all sorts of different areas of life, like food and kids and events, and kind of what, areas that people were thinking about trying to sort of make a difference in. And, I obviously, a 20-minute conversation with a few people is not highly likely to lead to lots of kind of breakthroughs, but hopefully that's a kind of the beginning of thinking about, what are some of the things that you are feeling are really important that you could do something or do anything about. One of the other groups that I sort of dropped into, one of the topics that came up was the idea of kind of keeping on pushing and how important it is that, once you have got started, once you have done something, to, make a difference in whatever area it is that you feel is really important. Obviously, change doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes weeks or months or years or generations to create change. And so I thought it was really interesting when this issue of kind of, the importance of keeping on pushing, of not giving up, came up. And I wonder, Christopher, I'm going to pick on you, Chris. You've given your long history in, activism, both from the NGO perspective and now kind of the corporate perspective. What kind of lessons do you feel that you've learned, hard won lessons around this idea of not giving up and keeping pushing and keeping going?
I am an eternal optimist. I think we face immense challenges, but I do wake up every morning believing that collectively we can solve the problems that our societies face. 2 nights ago, we launched a really cool project with Congressman John Lewis, the congressman who recently passed away and who was this iconic civil rights leader. And I think about that period of time in American history, right? I mean, a couple of centuries of kind of legalized segregation and discrimination. And I think about, I got the chance to meet Congressman Lewis about 18 months ago. he walked me through his office. It's like a living museum. It was one of the most incredible moments of my life. But that guy persevered at great personal cost, and he came out on the other side. And if you just think about so much work to be done, but how far we've come, and it's because, you know, change is slow, but change can happen. And so, you know, I think back to certainly my life experience and look back at someone like Congressman Lewis and say, if he could keep pushing, if he could remain optimistic in the face of everything that came his way, then who am I not to keep pushing?
Yeah, his story is really amazing. And if anyone is kind of interested in hearing a bit more, I was actually listening to a podcast the other day that he was interviewed on a few years back. The name of the podcast is On Being. It's sort of a 1 hour interview with him, and incredibly inspiring, and a brilliant example, actually. I'm glad you mentioned him, of somebody who was, you know, there fighting for what he believed was right his whole life, basically, and who I think really importantly inspired lots of other people to do so, and not necessarily just, you know, around race and discrimination. But there are lots of brilliant John Lewis quotes if you go online, all about, you know, it's a moral obligation when you see that something is wrong to do something to try and make it right.
Right. He referred to what he did as getting into good trouble.
Yes.
That he encouraged everyone to get into some trouble, get into some good trouble. That's what I like to think we should do.
Exactly. So I know I promised before the breakouts that I would kind of mention or suggest a few other practical things that people can do kind of now. So one suggestion that I have is probably most people are sort of at a desk or near a desk somewhere that has a Post-it or a sheet of paper. And if you have one, you know, kind of within arm's reach, I would encourage you to grab a Post-it or a little piece of paper that you can stick somewhere that starts with the words "I will" and ends with whatever it is that you're going to do to make a difference. The one small thing that you can do after this call or tomorrow morning, or certainly by the end of the week, to create the kind of change you want to see in the world. So, you know, examples, I will speak up whenever I see or hear someone being discriminatory. I will reduce the amount of single-use plastics in my life. I will eat less meat, whatever it might be. Doesn't matter. But write that down. It's a really, it's a lot of what we do at Today Do This is sort of based on behavioral science. Also, a lot of what we do is inspired by Martin Luther King's 6 steps of social change. And in terms of behavioral science part of things, you know, even just the act of writing down the thing that you're going to do and putting it somewhere where you can see it regularly helps to make sure that that thing gets done. One thing that I will encourage you not to write on your sheet of paper is, I will think about how I can, whatever it might be, cross out the part that says think about how I can and leave all the other bits. What else could you do? We have this wonderful thing called the internet. And there is a company called Google. There are also other search engines where you can go in and literally type in the issue that you care about and take action. And I will bet you that you will probably find lots of websites and information around what it is that you can do to take action on an issue that you care about. So do one of those things that they suggest, or at the very least, kind of, you know, subscribe to their newsletter or follow them on social media or share something online. Another thing that you can subscribe to, shameless plug, is our Today Do This newsletter. I'll put the link into the chat. But the reason I recommend doing that is that basically every week we write a newsletter which tackles one issue that was in the news that week and tells you one very, very simple thing that you can do that day to make a difference on that issue. So whereas you might find the news sort of distressing or depressing, if you sign up to our newsletter, you will not only be able to do something about it, but doing something about it will make you feel better. And the next one goes out tomorrow morning. What else? Oh, you can also follow us on Today Do This at Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook for one simple thing that you can do each and every day to make that day better than the one before it. And final suggestion is that you keep your eyes open for the next one of these Ethos Explorers events, because we are looking at doing, again, teaming up with the guys at Ethos, so sort of Today Do This, an Ethos co-hosted event where we'll do a sort of interactive, totally action-oriented workshop where I guarantee that you will not be able to leave the workshop without having taken action of some sort during that event on the thing that you were talking about doing today or something else entirely. So sort of date and details on that coming soon. And if you do nothing else, sign up to that when those details come around.
Daianna, thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you to Chris. You've both, I think, given us plenty of food for thought tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this experimental first night. We should all also just say happy birthday to Robbie, because he revealed in our breakout room that it's his birthday. So happy birthday, Robbie. Thank you for spending some of your birthday doing this. As I say, this has been our first event, so Nikki is going to drop a feedback form into the chat box, and we'll also follow it up with emails and stuff. But we genuinely want to know what you think, what you liked, what worked for you, what might not have. We want to hear your thoughts, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And we'd also really like to know if there are any other subjects that you'd like to cover on Ethos Explores in the future. As Daianna said, next time she will be taking over the reins and we'll be doing something really specific and practical on creating change. And that's likely to be in about a month's time. We're looking at about this time in October. For those of you who are subscribers, the last issue of the magazine went to print on Thursday, so we're expecting it back next week, so you'll get one very soon. For those of you who aren't, you know where you can get a copy. But thanks very much for all of your time. It's been a really interesting evening, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.